Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I found a couple of interesting pieces to talk about tonight. We'll kick things off with this really fantastic example of a 1988 Prehistoric Les Paul. It's been a while since we talked about the Prehistoric. Back about 4 years ago, I really dove into these things because historic reissues are cool, right? But for me, it's even cooler to have one from the 80s in the prehistoric era, meaning before the custom shop came out and called them historics. People weren't calling these things prehistorics, back in the 80s. These were just Les Paul reissues at that point in time. But check out the top on this one. I think this has to be one of the best I've seen for like a heavily flamed top that's not pinstripey. Oftentimes the prehistorics, they'll be pinstriped or you'll get a really wide flame. But this one is incredibly attractive to me, and the condition appears to be very good. Now the ABR1 bridge, it's technically upside down, but sometimes they just came out of the factory like that. The lacquer's definitely aged some. It's got that whole vintage look going on for it. The prehistorics, they don't have like the exact right tuners. They don't have the long neck tenon, but since they're mainly 80s instruments, they've kind of got a certain appeal to them. But this one is a 1988, and when it comes to the prehistorics, the late 80s are not as valuable as the early 80s. Really, the peak time for prehistorics, in my opinion anyways, is about 83 to 85. Now that doesn't include like the few 70s like dealer reissue models, those are definitely highly collectible, but anything outside of that Norland era is when they just start to change and become a little bit more modern. So like for example, this thing, a lot of people will advertise it, oh it still has Tim Shaw PAFs. But no, these are probably the PU490 series type pickups because you no longer have the brass screws. Just because it says patent number 2737842 and it's an 80s guitar does not mean you have Tim Shaw pickups. And since Tim Shaws sell for a lot on the used market, that's the bulk majority of the reason why the later 80s ones don't sell for as much. And on top of that, there were just a lot more of these things made as compared to like an 83 or an 84. Not mass produced by any means, I'm just, telling you how the market tells it. But this one, it's listed at a very reasonable $5,295. Like I'm even having some regrets filming this part of the episode. I kinda want it now. That's a nice one. Next up here, we have a brand new 2021 Les Paul Special Tribute in the P90s. Now, I'm kind of sad I haven't got to review one of these yet, and it mainly comes down to I've always been looking for a special example, because this is what took over the DC Junior and Special, those double cutaway blue and red guitars. There was also that bass version. They swapped them over into these. You can get them in P90 and humbucker form. Brand new, they're $1,000. But what's unique about them is you get the mahogany body, so A, that's why I'm showing you this one, is because it has beautiful wood grain. Just check that out, it's awesome. But B, they have maple necks, so you can find some of these that are just heavily figured. Like, they're not supposed to be, it's just the wood that they got in just happened to have a lot of figuring in it. And they're not really gonna set special stuff aside necessarily. So occasionally, you can find a nice one. So it's kind of been a game of wait and see at the dealers that actually post non-stock photos, and one that'll actually deal with me. And unfortunately, that just hasn't happened yet, because there's not a lot to talk about these things spec-wise for review and demos. So it'd be nice to have one that is an extraordinary, ordinary example. That one's offered by Murdoch Music in Utah. Next up, we have a 1982 Gibson Flying V. It was kind of tempting to pick this thing up, to kind of make a comparison video between the 70s Flying V that Gibson has out and like a real 70s V. I get it, it's an 82, but for the most part, the specs are about the same. But honestly, I don't even think I need that because the 70s V is more so a tribute to a mod Flying V rather than actually trying to reissue any of the specs. So in that aspect, I think I was a little bit hard on the 70s Deluxe, or I just had my expectations in the wrong location. I should have known that, based on the 70s Explorer and Flying V, that not likely to get exactly a reissue. But this particular Flying V looks pretty clean. Looks like we got the Tim Shaw pickups in here. If you zoom in, you could just barely make out the date stamps. But besides a ding on the neck, maybe a few scratches, if you're a collector, 70s and 80s Flying Vs, they are on a league of their own. All I gotta say is try one. They are fantastic. The newer Gibson USA ones, they're nice guitars, but they're nowhere near what these guys have going for them. But then again, they're also 2 to 3 times the price of the new one. This one being listed at $6,000. It's a bit proud, but at the same time, the condition looks pretty good. Next up, I'm seeing this Les Paul from 1979. This thing looks really clean because remember, these things came as satin finishes originally. So finding one that still has the satin hue, very difficult. Like this almost looks like a reissue from the photos. But my problem is if I'm going to pay a big premium for condition, I kind of want to see a video just to make sure that I'm not missing any blemishes. Like that headstock, fantastic. Love the wood grain. It appears to be in pretty good shape right there. The backplate still has the plastic over top of it. Fantastic. Even the neck on this thing has some interesting wood grain going on. And it's a fairly early Les Paul. It's not a first year, but it's early within the second year. The case appears to be pretty clean as well. But I'm almost seeing like an area where it's been rubbed a little bit into a gloss. So I think what this guy needs to do, if he happens to be watching, take a short video of it. Post that at the end of it. You're going to win some buyers over because he's been firm on his price of $2,000, but it appears every couple of days or so he drops the price $100 just to, you know, see who's watching and wants to buy. If this is truly like near mint condition, I believe somebody will pay $2,000 for the Paul that's nearly perfect. Now, if you can find one that's absolutely perfect, it'd be kind of interesting because the amount of interest in this particular model has grown so much in the past couple of years. Continuing on here, the Tom Petty SJ200 Wildflower got released today. So Gibson did a little video on it, but honestly it just left me asking more questions than was even answered and made me want to see more. So I went ahead and ordered one of these things. It's a $10,000 acoustic. It's very expensive, and to be honest with you, the front is kind of ugly in my opinion, but maybe it's because I don't understand where this one comes from yet. Like, I've read the description, so I know a little bit, but I need to do some research. Did his actually have this strange pick guard? Because if not, that was a strange choice. So I'll do some reading up on that. But if you actually think about it, this pick guard makes sense. Where do all of your picking scratches go? They go down here. And they go from here, from picking. So this actually protects your guitar, and it kind of looks like a hawk right there. But I guess if you're one of those guys that strums over your neck, you're kind of missing the whole pick guard up there. So, I mean, it really depends how you play. But if you're playing down here by the bridge, it's exactly kind of what you want. But what made me ultimately decide to go for this is there were a few special features. Mainly that, you know, the front... Say whatever you want about the front, I don't care. But the back, yeah, that's looking nice. I mean, they're all going to be different, so you could get a dud of a guitar, who knows, but this particular one looks good. The sides even also appear to be quilted maple, and that J200 Epiphone I had was phenomenal. So I can't wait to see what the $10,000 Gibson one's like. But I really appreciate the headstock on this thing. You get a special wildflower inlay and Grover Imperial tuners. And kind of an interesting truss rod cover going on. So this is mainly a collector's guitar, that's definitely for sure. I mean, they even get a flamed 3-piece maple neck going on this thing with a black stinger to boot. It's got interesting features, and that's why I figured, you know what, we might as well take a quick look at it. So if you're interested in purchasing one of these things and essentially sponsor the review and demo of this, you can contact me on my website or on my email. But they're only doing 100 of these guys. And for our last guitar today, let's take a look at this thing. So from far away, you're like, what kind of weird dragon design did somebody put on this thing? But then you start looking closer and you realize this is like a failed relic job. I mean, it's got a certain vibe. I'm not going to say it's the ugliest guitar I've ever seen, but it's very untraditional. Like, normally, if somebody's going to have one cover off and one cover on, it'll be a covered neck and an uncovered bridge. So just that in itself makes it kind of unique, but this started life as a black Les Paul custom, and somebody's, I don't know if they spray painted or what they did, but they finished over top of it silver. And then they just kind of wore through certain areas, trying to make it look like it's been road worn. I'll say the front does not look that good. It looks a little bit better when you think it looks like a dragon or something. But then you get to the back. They also finished this over and rubbed through certain areas. It looks like they even went down to the bare wood right there. Now this is just starting to remind me of like the Painted Over series. It's not the most realistic relicking, but at least it's got a certain vibe here. And then you get the back side of the instrument. Needless to say, I don't think this thing will sell for a huge premium because of the paintwork, that's for sure. But it could make for a good project or just, a story piece for somebody. But as far as the pickups, we're looking at either T-tops or Tim Shaw's most likely. We'd have to take the cover off and see. Whereas the neck is a Birchbucker 1. And it's also got one of those string butlers on it. This is just one of those guitars that has all the quirky features. They started off at $3,500, which I thought was a bit high. But now they're down to $2,700. Realistically, maybe $2,000. $2,200 if we're being generous, and I think that would have to go to somebody who just wants to keep it as is or knows how to rework guitars themselves. That's just my personal opinion though. You might love it and want to pay this guy that much. I guess the other downside is it is located in Korea, so if you're scared about buying guitars from overseas, that might disqualify this one for you, but it does look like he's only charging a reasonable $100 shipping. Just make sure they're not shipping by sea mail. But anyways, troglodytes, thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.